Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video we're going to learn the 1 to 4 player expansion to Nature, Flight, designed by Dominic Krapuschetz and published by North Star Game Studio, who helped sponsor this video. When predators roam the land, wings can come in quite handy, not only so you can leave for the skies, but your heightened perspective might reveal new environments to escape to. Flight is the first module for the game Nature, which this video assumes you already know how to play. If not, no worries, we have a tutorial video you can watch first, which I'll have linked in the description below, along with any of the other modules we might have videos for. The various modules give you new ways to play and experience nature, and you can mix and match them as you like. In this video, we're going to focus on the changes Flight adds to the core game, so join me at the table and let's learn how to play. To set up, follow all the steps for the core game of Nature, but also add what is known as the Faraway place beside the watering hole. These tokens are known as nests, and you can keep them near the size dials. The cards with this back make up the Flight deck, which you shuffle and set face down beside the Nature deck. Then finally, you give one of these Flight module player aids to each of the players. And that's the setup. When using the Flight module, in addition to the new elements this adds to your game, which we'll go over in a moment, you will now play 5 rounds instead of the usual 4. Also, during the preparation phase, along with adding plant tokens to the watering hole based on your number of players and the values shown here, you'll also add fed population tokens to this faraway space so that the total amount here is equal to the number of players in your game. If we assume we have 2 players, that means we'd add 2 here, and you use meat food tokens for them. In future preparation phases, you'll just add as many food tokens as necessary to get you back up to the 1 per player total. That means if there was 1 fed population left over here from a previous round, then we'd just add 1 more in a 2-player game. Also be aware, when it's time to gain your new species for the round, you may now choose between regular land or flying species. And you resolve this step in turn order, beginning with the first player and going clockwise around the table. A land species is collected in the usual way by taking a size dial set to 1 along with a population token. If you instead choose to take a flying species, show this by collecting a size dial set to 1 and population token, but also collect one of these nest tokens to set underneath of the size dial. This is a visual reminder to everyone that this is a flying species. Once everyone has their new species, you now all draw 5 cards as usual, but players now perform this step in turns, beginning with the first player and going clockwise around the table. When it's your turn to draw 5 cards, you can take them in any combination from the available decks of Nature or Flight. So as an example, I could take 2 Nature and 3 Flight cards, or maybe all 5 from the Flight deck, and so on. That said, you have to make the decision about what combination of cards you want, and then draw all of them before looking at any of them. So if I wanted 2 Flight and 3 Nature cards, I'd draw all 5 of those cards first, and then I'd be able to look at their faces. I should also mention each deck will have its own discard pile. And if a deck runs out while playing, you reshuffle its related discard pile into a new draw deck. Okay, earlier we saw how you create a flying species, but now I want to explain a couple of their unique characteristics. First, a flying species can have a maximum size of 2, so once it reaches that size, it cannot grow any larger. This means when you start a new round, if you have size dials from species that went extinct and you choose a flying species as your new one, any extra size that you would gain beyond the maximum of 2 is ignored. All right, with that understood, now let's talk about playing Flight cards as traits. These are assigned face down to a species, just like standard Nature cards, to be revealed later. As we know, in total, you can only have 3 traits assigned to any one species, but they can be any combination of Flight and/or Nature cards. You can even assign Flight cards to a species that isn't a flying species. The exception is if the trait specifies that it can only be given to a flying species, like we see here. This flocking trait can only be assigned to a flying species, while this seed dispersal trait could be assigned to any species, land or flying. With that in mind, let's see how the new traits work. The first time a species with this seed dispersal trait forages during a round, it says that you take 3 plant tokens from the supply and add them to the watering hole. This happens automatically. You cannot choose to ignore this effect or add less than 3 extra tokens. Before looking at the next trait, I want to point out a very important rule. A flying species can only be hunted by another flying species. In other words, if a flying species has the hunting trait, it can target land or other flying species when it hunts. On the other hand, this is a land species, which we can tell because there's no nest token under its size dial, and that means it cannot hunt flying species. It can only hunt other land species. This trait, however, creates an exception. You'll notice it allows a species with this ability to hunt a flying species. This trait does not turn a species into a hunter. For example, this species doesn't have the hunting trait. If it did, its size dial would be flipped over to the hunter side. So even though it may hunt flying species with this trait when it is able to hunt, it is not able to hunt currently. If it gains the hunter trait later, then this camouflage trait would allow it to hunt a flying species. And this is true even though this is a land species. Thematically, you can think of this species as being able to sneak up on a flying species that has temporarily landed. This trait has another ability listed here, which says that it cannot be hunted. So whether it is a flying or land species, while a species has the camouflage trait, no other species with the hunt trait can target it, unless the hunter has this good eyesight trait, which, as you can see, says that it ignores camouflage when hunting. Also, whether it is hunting or not, it gains 1 extra food of whatever type it is currently eating. So when foraging from the watering hole, it gains 1 extra food from there, if possible. If it is instead hunting another species, after eating based on its target's size, it then gains an additional meat token from the supply. There are 2 other traits that come in this module, but they will make more sense once we know a couple of other rules first. At the start of your feeding turn, before you've taken a feeding action, any of your flying species that are fully fed will immediately migrate to a faraway place. To show this, you put their nest token onto their size dial. Then you check the faraway place tile. If there are any fed population tokens there, each species that is now migrating collects 1. This represents those species raising a family, providing you with extra food tokens to score later. And just be aware, it doesn't matter which type of food token is on the fed population that you've collected. Remember, this could have been meat or it could have been a plant token. The main thing is that you're gaining an extra population and food token, and the food token will just end up behind your screen during the scoring step. If a species migrates when there are no fed population tokens left in the faraway place, you still put its nest token on top of its dial to show that it has gone to the faraway place, but it does not gain any bonus fed population tokens. Either way, any species at the faraway place are considered to be out of play for the rest of the feeding phase. This means they cannot forage or hunt or be hunted, and you ignore any of their trait effects. When it gets to the start of the scoring step, you then put your empty nests back under any of your flying species who went to the faraway place. This puts them back into play, so you can score their food tokens by moving them behind your screen as usual. You'll find all of the steps for migration here on your Flight Player Aid if you need a reminder during the game. With migrating understood, we can now learn about this nesting trait, which says that if there are plant tokens in the watering hole after a migrated species returns, that species gains a fed population. In other words, when the scoring step of the round begins, flying species return from the faraway place as usual, but if they have the nesting trait and there's at least 1 plant token in the watering hole, you collect another population token from the supply with a food token on it. And that means you'll then gain that extra token during that round's scoring. Finally, we have the flocking trait, which, as we see, can only be assigned to a flying species. Its effect says that it gains +2 defense for each non-migrated species in play with the flocking trait including itself. So in a case like this, our flocking species here gains 2 extra defense for this flocking trait and another 2 for this one, for a total of 4 extra defense. We do not count this flocking species because it's already migrated to the faraway place, as its nest shows. Also notice, a species with the flocking trait will migrate at the end of your feeding turn if it is fully fed. Remember, you normally check to see if a species migrates at the beginning of each of your turns during the feeding step. But if a flocking species becomes fully fed, it then migrates at the end of that turn. This helps it collect a fed population token from the faraway place faster and gets it out of play sooner so it cannot be targeted by hunters. So, as you can see, there are a lot of advantages to being a flying species, but there is also a downside. At the end of the game, when calculating your final score, normally you gain 2 bonus points for each species you have remaining, but this does not include any flying species you may have. So in this case, I would only get 2 extra points for this species, but not for either of these 2 flying ones. You'll find a reminder of the general rules for flying species here on your player aid, as well as a summary of each of the traits introduced in this module on the other side. If you're playing nature with some of the other optional modules, you'll find some information about how this flight module interacts with them in the rulebook here, along with some helpful answers to questions you might have at the back here. This flight module also comes with components and rules for solo play, and depending on which printing of the game you have, you may also have received a promotional trait to add into your game. But those elements I'll leave for you to discover on your own. Otherwise, that's everything you need to know to play the flight module for nature. If you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. And if you'd like to support us directly, you can join our Patreon team, which I'll have linked below. But until next time, thanks for watching.